So have you ever had this happen in a narcissistic relationship, an intimate narcissistic relationship? You're done. You're done. You've had it. You are manipulated out. You are gaslighted out. You are invalidated out. You are tired of the hypocrisy. You're tired of the lying. You're tired of the shape shifting. You're tired of the going back and forth between good days and bad. You're tired of trying and trying and trying and trying. And when you finally say to the narcissistic partner, you say, we need to talk. Or maybe you don't even bring it up yet, but you start disengaging and the narcissistic partner notices your distancing. And they say to you, is there someone else? Have you met someone else? And you look at them as though they are a four-headed unicorn that walked into your living room thinking, the last thing I need is one more relationship after this one was such a mess. This, did you meet someone else, is a frequent accusation against people who find themselves in the difficult position of wanting to end an intimate relationship with a narcissistic person. And the narcissistic person may not want the relationship to end. So again, the sequence is you're in a narcissistic relationship and you say, enough, I cannot do this anymore. You decide, okay, I got to get out of this. I got to end it. And so you start making moves in that direction. And I got to tell you, one of the first things many people hear is, oh, let me guess. You met someone else. Who was it? Was that person at the gym? Was that person you went on that business trip? Oh, let me guess. It's that person on Facebook who keeps, or Instagram, who keeps liking your pictures. Well, so let's talk about why this happens. There are a few reasons for this. The first is narcissistic people are very rejection sensitive and more afraid of abandonment than you'd think. Especially, this tends to be much more pronounced in people who have more of a vulnerable narcissistic pattern. But even grandiose narcissistic folks struggle with this. But narcissism and rejection sensitivity go together, okay? We'll talk about what's happening for those malignant narcissistic folks in a moment. They've got a different journey. But the abandonment wounds, the fragility, the insecurity, they are very real for narcissistic folks. It's why you're often quite confused in these relationships. The shame that this abandonment vulnerability brings up, or when it gets triggered in them brings up, it doesn't only bring up the sense of active aggression or passive aggression in a narcissistic pattern, but also brings up another fear for narcissistic people of being replaced. How could they be replaced if they're so special, right? Now, narcissistic people have not cornered the market on this fear. There are plenty of us who don't have narcissistic personalities, who do struggle with abandonment and rejection sensitivity and the fear of being replaced. Those are very sort of human things, but it's very pronounced here. And it's sort of at odds with the sort of often grandiose veneer of the narcissistic person. But when you look at the narcissistic person, this rejection sensitivity also combines with their fragile ego and their shame. And so it couldn't be that you've rejected them. It's got to be that you immoral, unethical piece of you-know-what, you went out and found someone else. Now, the second is the lack of self-reflection we see in narcissism. Interestingly, this idea that you just went out there and found someone else, while that may relate to their own, again, rejection sensitivities and abandonment fears and all of that, it also relates to the idea that we see in many narcissistic people of being incapable of seeing that their relationship, that their behavior in the relationship was a problem. In other words, it's a mystery to them why you would want to leave. They thought they were a great partner. And this may be after you've had what feels like 1,000 conversations about this and have literally done everything short of making a PowerPoint presentation of all the issues in the relationship, right? But they don't think they did anything wrong. In many cases, to an almost delusional level, narcissistic people think they are great partners. So when you leave or try to leave, despite you having tried repeatedly to give them another chance and forgive and communicate what you need to be different in this relationship, instead you're met with, oh, I guess you just met someone else, because it could never be them. Then they also get bonus points, right? Because if they're able to write this off to you met someone else, then that again means that you're the shady, sneaky, unethical one that went out and met someone new, and they're the wronged party. They get to play victim. Now, the third issue relates to something called projection. Projection is what we call more of a primitive defense. And in essence, it is this unconscious, it's not done in awareness, it's the unconscious projection of the icky, unacceptable, shameful, unprocessed parts of ourselves onto another. We all engage in this from time to time. For example, it's when the liar accuses other people of being dishonest. The cheater accuses their partner of being unfaithful or inappropriate, right? The very angry person accuses everyone else of being so angry. Projection allows the projector to retain this almost grandiose, healthy, good sense of themselves, which helps them feel safer within, because they've now projected all their ick onto other people. It's like having a better stomach after you vomit. Projection is a classical defense in narcissism. And the confusion of the narcissistic relationship is often the chronic accusations you have faced in this relationship about things that are just not true about you. Now, this may not always be the case, but because the narcissistic person may have been shady in the past, may currently be shady, or do things that are sort of shady adjacent, they're often going to project that shady stuff on you. So the assumption is that you left because you were being shady, mostly because they're projecting their shady stuff on you, and then the other reasons I gave as well. Now, the fourth issue on why they're accusing about this here is jealousy and competition, dominance and control. Jealousy, competition, dominance, power, control are the driver in most narcissistic relationships, and these themes are most pronounced in malignant narcissistic relationships. This is what we may observe in more severe narcissistic relationships. But the idea that you are walking out of the psychological cage into which you were placed, for the malignant narcissist, that implies that there's a collaborator. Again, for the average malignant narcissistic person, they are not reflecting on how their terrifying control could be the reason you are leaving the relationship. So your leaving must be because someone, and malignant narcissists are very, very suspicious. So they believe that it must be because someone is helping you and is intimate with you. Suspiciousness is a signature characteristic of all forms of narcissism, but particularly vulnerable and malignant narcissism, as well as more of the dark tetrad styles. Odds are that if you are in this more severe narcissistic relationship, you may have already in this relationship experienced things like having your electronic communication monitored, your phone calls listened to, your comings and goings carefully watched. Even if you're in the grocery store with them and you say a brief, polite hello to the grocery store check stand person, even that would be viewed with suspicion in these relationships. So the assumption that the malignant narcissistic person has had is that someone has seduced you out of the relationship, that you've managed to slip out of their control and someone else is responsible. The fifth issue is all the grandiose stuff. Again, how could anyone leave them? They're great. The almost delusional grandiose sense that they're the best, they're awesome, they're a great partner, they've put up with all your nonsense, combined with an entitlement that nothing should happen in their lives unless they want it to happen, with the arrogance, means that if this is what is happening, it is only happening because someone else came along and played on your need for validation and your weakness, or that you are just a bad person who doesn't know how good you've had it in this relationship. Now, the sixth reason is a consistent narcissistic theme, which I've already hinted at, which is victimhood. Narcissistic people have, again, this almost delusional conviction that bad things only happen to them, or that when bad things happen to them, they're worse than they've ever happened to anyone else, and that people are out to get them. Your wanting to break up starts to be viewed as sort of this sinister plot that has been brewing for a long time with another person, despite everything they've done for you and what a great partner they've been, that nobody appreciates them, that you're the one who took advantage of them. And by them assuming there's another person and you've left, it really cements the victimized narrative. Look, I did so much for them and they still left me. Woe is me. And then they get validation. The combination of insecurity, rejection sensitivity, entitlement, victimhood, suspiciousness, projection, fragile ego, and lack of any self-reflective capacity, all tend to combine to this assumption that if you're leaving, it can't be them. It must be that you're leaving them for someone else. And this actually can make even bigger messes for you as the person who wants to leave or who has left the relationship. You might really feel quite crazy and gaslighted and may put a lot of effort in trying to convince them or prove to them that that's not the case and showing them your phone and all that other stuff. But that doesn't work, because then what that really means, what you're then really saying without saying it, is actually that this relationship with you sucks. This is why I want to get out. And the narcissistic schema and mindset, they're actually less able to make sense of that. It is easier for them to believe you left them for someone else. That makes you the immoral bad person. And of course, that everyone in the world is on the make and out to ruin their lives. That fits better for them. So you trying to explain it is not going to do anything, because they can't see this version of this wasn't okay. Now, in more severe narcissistic relationships, this belief that you are out there and met someone new can actually feel terrifying. Even a minimal communication you have with someone, a colleague, a friend, even a family member, can be jumped on as a possible person you are leaving them for, as though you're going to leave them for your cousin. A malignant narcissistic person may go through your phone, your emails, stalk you, put trackers in your bag, in your car, follow you to work to try and figure out who you are leaving them for, because they are that convinced of it. And of course, in more severe narcissistic relationships, especially if there has been a history of danger or violence, this can become downright dangerous, because now these cracks in what they believed was their all having power, domination, control, can result in them reacting in violent and desperate ways of acting out. Many, if not most people, leave narcissistic relationships because they've had it. They recognize things aren't really going to change. And more than a few will say, I got to tell you, I honestly don't know that if I ever want to be in a relationship again after that mess. For most people leaving these relationships, there is no other person. There is just sheer mental, emotional, psychological exhaustion. And I got to tell you, a hell of a lot of courage, because leaving a relationship with a narcissistic person is nothing short of a nightmare and a miracle, even when it's more mild narcissistic relationships. So even when you do leave and there is no other person, the narcissistic person will be obsessively scanning your social media, talking with your mutual friends and acquaintances, and trying to find the data that indeed you did leave them for someone else. They will assume that every time you're going to the airport, you're trying to meet someone at the airport. When you stay in a hotel, you're having an affair. When you go out with friends, why are you so dressed up? Strangely, I honestly believe that if most narcissistic folks found out that there was someone else, it would enrage them, but internally, psychologically, it might be easier for them, because they wouldn't have to face up to the idea that a relationship with them was awful enough to have to leave. But obviously, if there is someone else, it can become even more contentious if their suspicions that you left for someone else are borne out. And this can have a lot of implications for things, especially if this is a divorce, family court, custody, if you have a friendship network, all of that. Now, obviously, when people leave narcissistic relationships, it's all kinds of messy, right? There may be smear campaigns, attempts to sort of pollute other people's minds against you and share things about you that aren't okay, telling everyone else that they really believe you left for someone else, and being so convincing that people who know you will say, did you meet someone new? They might even just be downright lying and telling everyone that you were having an affair or other liaison, and it's telling a very convincing story. Like I said, people may start believing it and asking you about that. So then you get the fun of feeling gaslighted by the entire world. So if this scenario has happened to you, feel free to drop it in the comments if you want. Now, this theme isn't unusual. It isn't unusual for this to happen. And when you leave one of these relationships go back to the top. I'm going to put the Kelly note at the end and even have you write it to her, okay? Because it cuts the thing up and she may not pick it up in the edit. So keep going. Okay, there we go. So if this experience has happened to you, please drop it in the comments if you want to share about it, or at least you might see the comments and say, you're not alone in this one. Listen, it isn't unusual for this to happen. And when you leave a narcissistic relationship from sheer disgust, betrayal, exhaustion, and yet you get accused of leaving for someone else, it really does feel like the final gaslighted cherry on top of a very toxic ice cream sundae. This may not be new territory for you within the relationship. Accusations of cheating and infidelity and inappropriate behavior are quite common for narcissistic partners, especially as you start to disengage from the relationship, not take the bait, not get into the mud with them, not react. When that happens, the accusations may also start flying and be a prelude to the accusations that will come when you actually do leave the relationship. Kind of tells you, again, what's going to come. And I am going to say a side note here. Are there some people who ultimately find the courage to leave a narcissistic relationship through their own exit affair? Sure. That's not what this video is about. We have other videos about the idea of the exit affair from the narcissistic relationship. That's not common. Far, far more people who leave these relationships will leave because they've had it and still have to face up to the bizarre accusation of that you left them for someone new. And what's interesting is even if the narcissistic person is cheating on you, and that's why the relationship is unstable, they're still going to accuse you of this if you're the one who decides to leave. So you aren't alone. And as I said, many people who get out of these relationships often do take the stance of never again. I am not doing this relationship thing again. And with time, that may change, but I get it. And I've met more than a few people who said, you know what, I got friends, I got a life, I don't need this mess anymore. These relationships, narcissistic relationships, are basically like living in an alternative reality. So why shouldn't the breakups be the same? For those of you who may actually be going through dangerous relationships, we do have various resources in the show notes if those are helpful for you. Thanks again.